kind of organization. So, welcome, Alan, and thank you very much for joining the session. I hope you have a great day. Okay, so very interesting lecture. Yeah, please, Alan, you can give some briefing about yourself, and then you can start if you are able to hear me. Okay, can you hear me, Alan? Yeah. No, we are. I think you're in mute. If you can see you, I think you're in mute. So why don't we unmute it, please? You're in mute. Can you unmute, please? No, we are unable to hear you. So can you unmute? Yeah. Sorry. Can Deep, can you help me?
Can you hear me now?
Yeah. Yes. I was supposed to send a message to you. Yeah, I can hear you.
Good afternoon from Nigeria.
Yeah, good afternoon.
Thank you, Dr. Sheikh Abdul Qadir. It's a sunny day here in Nigeria, in Africa. It's the season of the Harmattan. I don't know if Nigeria has mainly two weathers, the Harmattan and the rainy season. Currently, we're in the Harmattan season. The Harmattan season is part of the dry season. It usually happens towards November, December, January, maybe ends at the end of January or early February. So we are currently in the Harmattan season. It's quite cold, and it's a nice, but in the afternoon you will have everywhere very hot. Okay, so you're welcome. Thank you very much, Sheikh. Thank you for the introduction. We are looking at, and then thank you for this platform, for this opportunity, because like Nital Zaveri mentioned, it's great to have this kind of platform where people can come and learn. For example, your presentation yesterday was fantastic, and I was asking for the slides. It's going to be quite useful to a whole lot of people. So platforms like this would really, really help. And then you're doing very well for the supply chain industry. It's for the profession, you're doing very fantastically well. And thank you for that, being a supply chain professional as well. So we are delving today into the medical industry, the supply chain in Africa. What is the supply chain of the medical industry in Africa? How is it? What are the challenges? What are the opportunities and innovations? These are some of the things we want to find out. I have limited time to make this presentation, and therefore I'm going to be quite straight to the point and brief, but at least we will be able to get to the meat of the conversation. So medical supply chain industries in Africa. So the content here is introduction of the African continent, medical industries across the African continent, and then the challenges across Africa, the fiscal policy direction across Africa, supply chain challenges, and then fiscal direction across Africa, and then finally the bright side, which is invest in Africa, and then finally as a conclusion. Okay, so as you all know, the African continent is the second largest continent after Asia, with 55 member states of countries of the African Union. So we have what we call AU, African Union, consisting of 55 countries with about 1.4 billion people, with about 2,500 to 3,000 native languages. And even though these are not primarily the official languages, but we have different languages in Africa, over 2,500. Of course, this is excluding the official business communication. And then with a landmass of about 30.37 million kilometers and the GDP per capita of $2,180, which is nominal estimation by 2022. This is taken from Google. It has a 3% growth projection, according to World Bank and IMF, with an inflation to go downward, because Africa has been experiencing inflation year on year, but it is projected that between 2024 to 2025, inflation will plummet downward, according to World Bank 2023 business reports. The major official languages or business languages in Africa, of course, English holding over 50% or more of the official business communication in Africa, French followed by French, and then you have Spanish and Portuguese, and then Arabic for the Northern African countries or axis. Access to essential medicines has significantly improved, though, and the resident healthcare market is poised to reach a $260 billion by 2030, inshallah, according to Virginia Economic Development. Sorry, I have a power outage. So, according to the Virginia Economic Development Partnership, and a moderate compound annual growth rate. There is a significant medical and laboratory companies, especially indigenous ones, representing different overseas brands. Of course, these indigenous companies go out there, get the exclusivity SLEs or agreements with these companies overseas, and then they represent them here in Africa. A case study is Nigeria. So many overseas companies being represented with different names here in Nigeria. And then with either as suppliers, agents, or franchise holders. The medical industry are liberalized in most African countries, but governments still hold and controls almost everything, including having more of these medical and laboratory establishments like general hospitals, federal medical centers, central labs, and all that, along with other policies and investment. So the government of African countries still hold a huge share, even though the medical industry is liberalized. So meaning it is an all player. You come in and you play, and if you're able to outplay anybody, then you get the profits. However, the government of the day still controls major activities in the medical field. And then the medical industries across the African continent. Africa, of course, we are all aware of this, but we are heavily import dependent. And because of this, we have most of our medical facilities or medical drugs or equipment coming from China, India, and Europe. You have a lot of Africans, especially Nigeria, going to India for medical reasons, and China as well. And then a few, of course, from America. Almost everything, of course, is imported into the African continent, such as nose masks, as simple as needles, syringes, gloves, adhesives, bandages, lens, disinfectant, and the rest of it. Although there are those that are currently being done locally, especially during the COVID-19 pandemic, Africans, especially Nigeria, a case study, people started developing or innovating by using, creating nose masks and other things to ward off the COVID-19, the pandemic during that period. However, Africa is still being funded because African government are seriously underfunding the healthcare sector, and that is the fact. It is heavily underfunded, and even though this COVID-19 taught us a great lesson, nothing has really changed. We still depend on the funds from the outside, from IMF, from World Health Organizations, and then from America and other parts of the world. During the COVID-19, Africa heavily depended on China, Europe, and America for vaccines, ventilators, and other basic equipment in managing COVID-19 pandemic, the COVID-19 patients. Due to lack of these medical laboratory equipment, Africa lost over 259,000 people as of 2022 to the pandemic, even though this is not to be compared to elsewhere. But however, these were avoidable deaths occasioned by years of decadence and total neglect of the healthcare sectors across Africa. Most spend from their pockets here. That's the truth. And what is the reason? This is because the medical insurance, which we call the HMO here, health management organizations, are just about 5% across Africa, with skyrocketing exchange rates, making medical care too expensive for the majority. So a lot of people spend from the pocket. And then because we also have an unstable exchange rate, meaning you can have a dollar, let's take Nigeria, for example, you can have a dollar, 1,730 naira today, and then in the afternoon, it could be 1,735. So you have a 5 naira. So this continue to make things quite difficult. The currently exchange rate is over 1,700 naira in Nigeria. And then when you were to convert this into dollars, that will be a lot of money. And it's really, really eating deep into the pockets of so many Africans. Medical industries in Africa, the challenges. In addition, the following has severely worsened medical supply chain in the continent. One is remoteness. Africa has so many hinterlands, villages, where it is almost not connectable. They are not areas you can connect with. And then it's hindering the people there. Little things like malaria is wiping and ravaging such areas. Bad road network, inaccessibility, storage, which is lack of warehousing or cold chain system, and other inventory facility. For example, the cold chain, we have very epileptic power supply in Africa. So if you have a cold chain, of course, you'll power it with an electricity. So you'll probably turn to maybe alternative power supply like solar, inverters, or diesel. And these things are quite expensive. And then there's insecurity. Of course, in Africa, you have one militant or terrorist organization ravaging one part of Africa or the other, and the countries are facing, and it's a big challenge to move goods from one place to another. Theft. People sometimes steal these things, will lay vehicles on the road, containers, and they steal from these guys. Corruption. Yeah, it's a big problem. It's everywhere, but it's a big problem here. Government policies like high tariff exchange rate fluctuations that I mentioned earlier, high tariffs of up to 20%, up to 20%. Of course, we are aware that most African countries are developing nations, and so they depend on taxes, especially those that does not have so much natural resources like oil, like petroleum and all that. They depend heavily on taxes, especially import tariffs to finance their national budgets. And so because of this, there is the importation of these medical facilities are burdened by so much tax. Low spending, like I told you earlier, it is 5% or less spending on the healthcare sector across Africa. Technology and electricity, like I mentioned earlier. Of course, if you don't have electricity, technology definitely will be almost out because you need electricity to enjoy technology. Business environment and sustainability. Okay, and then is the fiscal policy direction across Africa. Over 23 years ago, there was the Abuja Declaration, which recommended at least 15% commitment to the medical sector across Africa. And only Cape Verde, as of today, has achieved this target. And Malawi inched closer with a 12% allocated to their healthcare, while Nigeria, Ghana, and other countries are still hovering between 5% or less. Currently, the budget of Nigeria is within 5% or less, and same is Ghana's last budget. In 2021 and to date, Africa spent an average of 5% of its GDP on health, and most depend on external sources, like I mentioned to you earlier, to finance their healthcare sector, like from IMF, World Bank, and from the World Health organizations. And sometimes for the USA, agencies like the non-governmental agencies or foundations, most spend out of their pockets, with exchange rate fluctuations spiking the cost of medical care. Health, high tariff on import, customs clearance, and documentation issues with delays at the ports also hinder supply chain across Africa, and it's a big problem for the medical industry. For many African countries, tariffs are an important source of government revenue and may be justified to protect emerging industries. Yet, an immediate response to facilitate access to key health products require open markets. Temporary tariff and tax cuts could improve access. These are suggestions of how Africa can leverage on the possibility of having a better healthcare. And this is based on the ITC recommendations, their findings and their recommendations. And then continuing the supply chain challenges is remote and bad road network, technology and electricity, cost of doing business. Like I told you, high import tariff and delays. And what are these delays? Let's say you want to register a product registration, or you want to make inroads into Africa with certain products. So what happens after going through the whole stress or gamut of wahala we call here in Nigeria of trying to register? Another problem is paper or documentation, the clearing process. The minimum you can get is about 2 weeks. Sometimes it could last for months. And such delays does not encourage anyone. And because you have a fluctuating exchange rate, so if you intended to come in January and there were some documentation issues and delays, it takes you to sometime in February or March, and then the exchange rate catch up with you, always going higher, and most times never coming down. Like they say here in Nigeria, nothing goes up in Nigeria and never comes down. Except the only thing certain is we go to bed and wake up the next day if Allah allows you. Okay, so storage, warehouse, and cold chain system, insecurity, weather conditions. So you have to understand the weather conditions, and that's why I began with the type of weather in Africa. Most African country has 2 seasons, which is the dry season and the rainy seasons. So you have to understand this season, except for South Africa, maybe one other countries, maybe Northern African countries, but especially the core African countries has majorly 2 seasons or 2 weather conditions. And then you have to understand during rainy seasons, it is quite difficult for supply chain. You know why? The reason is the road network in Africa is bad. And then when it is raining and you have a container load of items or a cargo moving from one destination to another, because of bad road, you will see erosion, you will see water clogging, and everywhere filled with water. And sometimes the containers slip, they fall, and then there's a big loss. So you have to understand these weather conditions. And then for items requiring cold chain facility, we have weather that can rise especially Southern Africa, about 35 to 40 degrees Celsius. And then Northern Africa can rise up to 45 degrees Celsius. I'm sure Dr. Sheikh rather understands that in Dubai, what you have in Dubai plays out in Africa, Northern Africa, especially Northern Nigeria, where you have weather conditions rising up to 40 to 45 degrees Celsius. And then skills and capabilities are part of the problems. Of course, there is good news. There are good news in this area. Fiscal, monetary, and exchange rate policies and decisions are issues for African countries. Fiscal policies or fiscal or monetary policy is that a government can wake up one morning and decide to say, okay, we are, for example, some 2 years ago, in the FMCG, fast-moving consumer goods, government woke up in Nigeria to say they want to tax, they want to apply 20% excise tariff on manufactured goods. 20% is a lot for any businessman, but that, people complained and then challenged this with the Manufacturing Association of Nigeria, man, challenging this will kill business and then bring about laying off of so many people that the country and the economy is already with so much uncertainty. Any investment, and even if you were in the business already, for example, some companies are divesting and some are departing Africa. Why? Because the exchange rate is no longer stable, and then to source dollar, because most things are dollarized, so to say, in Africa. So sometimes you have to go to the bank to get dollars, and then because of these reasons, it becomes quite difficult. People are getting advantages over manufacturing companies for frivolities. People want to go on holidays and then they get dollars and all that. And then this reduces the dollar out there in the market for people, for businesses to leverage it. And then it's forcing a lot of them to depart the country. Medical industry continues to be a challenge. To facilitate market access, 88 countries, however, has reduced import duties or internal taxes on health products by May 2020 because of the pandemic. Among those are 38 developed and 50 developing economies. Like in Africa, you have Angola, Cameroon, Chad, Senegal, Tanzania will remain even after the pandemic. This was the report. Has it? No. They were only pushed into taking this decision in 2020 because of what was happening. And then they also needed loans and all that from IMF and from World Bank, and they needed support and funding from World Health Organization. But the moment things seem to be better, they're back to normal. Imagine in a continent 23 years ago promising 15% allocation to as a medical sector is still hovering around or below 5%. Only Cape Verde and Malawi. Cape Verde is already at 15%, and Malawi is doing 12%. The almighty Nigeria and Ghana and the rest, and South Africa are not doing up to that percentage agreed at the Abuja Declaration. So, having said that, they are not doing this, they are not doing that. What are the bright sides to investing in Africa? What are the bright sides of supply chain in Africa? Of course, it is not all bad news in Africa. It is not all bad news. Governments across Africa, through the Africa Free Trade Agreement, is looking to reduce import tariffs for certain medical laboratory equipment and consumables after lessons from the COVID-19 pandemic. Records show governments are now allowing more players and suppliers to open up and widen the market. There is more awareness to increase healthcare allocations, to bring in more medical equipment to avoid pandemic scenarios and save lives. Because most of the deaths were avoidable if government had taken initiative and, forestalled some of these deaths. Because what they should have done is to increase funding of the medical or the healthcare sector, which has to do with life. I currently work in the medical sector, and so I understand what this is. There is investment in medical infrastructure, road infrastructure, electricity and technology across Africa, especially in Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, Egypt, Malawi, Cape Verde, and others. Huge investments. Remote parts of Africa are being connected, and people are getting access to urban areas to get medical assistance. And supply chain, because of this road network infrastructure, it is becoming easier to move items from one point to the next. And the goal of supply chain is to make sure that the end-to-end supply chain is to make sure that item gets to the final consumer. So the people in remote places are getting these items as expected. There is commitment also to reduce corruption, with agencies adopting not just naming and shaming now, but systems to forestall corrupt practices, encouraging local players, both indigenous and foreign investors. Investments in technology like 5G, championed by MTN in Nigeria, is a big sign African countries, is a big sign that African countries, especially Nigeria, SA, Ghana, are ready for business. E-commerce and retail business is on the rise in Africa, with online transactions bolstered by improved technology, electricity, banking systems, and stronger, stricter, and coordinated cyber crimes fighting agencies and fraud-proof platforms, etc. So these platforms are making it easier for us to transact now. 2 days ago, I transacted with an e-commerce outfit wherein I purchased something through the bank. I never met them before, and then I'm tracking it. It's being shipped. This wasn't happening before in Nigeria, and this is being shipped from another country. So this is now the in thing. It's not happening across Africa, especially Nigeria, South Africa, Ghana, and other African countries. Improve awareness of medical supply chain management and requisite skills, capabilities, and capacities. Plenty of training and certification institutions and bodies teaching supply chain and churning out roundly well-trained manpower who are supply chain professionals in different organizations, medical or any other industries in Africa. Africa is a big, 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 big opportunity for medical investment and for supply chain. And I will say you are welcome to Africa, and thank you. I would like to move to the next slide so that I don't know if you have a question, so that because I'm running against time too, so that we can allow all the others to make their presentations as well and ask questions. Dr. Sheikh.
Yeah. So thank you, Allan. Thank you very much. It's very, very heavy with the numbers. Okay, so can you just summarize how is that going on in very quickly, high level summary? So whatever we just talk about. So that is number one. Okay, so how is that trends going on now currently with African countries at high level, so that we just we learn about it. Then what is next? Okay, so how the Africa in general and Nigeria in particular going to transform next 2 to 3 years? So what is your advice for the companies outside Africa, and what are the companies inside Africa? So how is that trend going on as far as the supply chain is concerned, Allan?
Thank you, Sheikh. Currently, like I did mention, Nigeria, as a case study here, moved the percentage allocated in the budget previously about 3-point-something% to about 4% plus. And this is to show that, of course, we are not meeting the 15%, but there is a clear commitment towards that aspect. And African countries with the ECOWAS and other sub-regional bodies now collaborating more like before to ease off trade within. So, and these will aid supply chain. And currently too, there is technology. There's more investment in technology. There is also electricity improvement. Before in Africa, especially Nigeria, where people weren't having power supply for up to 2-3 hours a day. Today, it is improved. It has improved, and this is aiding. Of course, it will aid cold chains, warehousing, and all that, because you also need all of these for to have a camera, have scanners, and all that. And this is improving supply chain in Nigeria. And then also, like I mentioned, regional collaboration. So, and then there is a drop in the tariff. There is drop in tariff, unlike before when governments across Africa saw tariff as opportunities to fund their national budget. Now they would rather go for IMF later, but reduce imports currently being done. And then also there is gradual encouragement on the HMOs, health management organizations, to improve so that people can key into these opportunities. And like I did say to you on supply chain, more people. There is infrastructural development across African continent. Currently, Nigeria is building, and then there are railways from one country to the next. This is to encourage interregional trade. And then since this development through all the endemic scenarios, there's so much investment and so much conversation towards ensuring that people has cheaper and quicker attention to medical facilities and opportunities. So I'm certain when it comes to investment here, government is already open to people investing more, especially in Nigeria, because I reside more here in Nigeria. So qualified people. You know why? Because you're already having brain drain in Africa. And what is this brain drain? You're having people rushing to Canada, people rushing to the USA and UK, and these are fantastic doctors. And these guys go there. Some of them become cleaners, some of them are taxi drivers, and some are just assistant doctors or nurses. So Nigeria is now encouraging people. These guys are, you know, and to better the remuneration for doctors. And then government is now encouraging people to stay back. And so when you come to Nigeria, especially foreign professionals, Nigeria is open. Africa is an open ground, unlike other continents where there are so much restrictions. Here in Africa, it's an open place where businesses are encouraged.
Perfect. So I think you already explained about the infrastructure readiness in African continent. Okay, so it's going on. How about the internet readiness and also the regulatory readiness? So I think they are going hand in hand, and this is one of the most important part where you take it up. Okay, so this will be
yes, internet is fine. You know, the problem with internet is remoteness. So initially, some 10 years ago, there were a few masts. So because of the remoteness of these places, insecurity to install this mast and all that. Currently, Nigeria is connected to 5G. So it will aid internet connections. And then there are so many, even the current, the Elon Musk internet, what is the name now? It's in Nigeria. And then I tell you, it's affordable, very, very affordable. And people buy data for as low as 500 naira. So you can actually do a lot of business here. And then, but it just starts, for me, I think it's a big business for a company like Frusi. Like I did mention to you, Nigeria is still banking on Odoo, other ERPs like Say 300, and SAP. These are expensive, quite expensive ERPs. For a fruit seed to come in, and Nigeria is quite open because a lot of businesses in Nigeria is still Excel based, and I know that Excel cannot be totally relied upon to run any fantastic business, any accurate forecasting. So with a fruit seed that is, if not better than some of these ERPs in Nigeria, I'm certain the company will make a headway in this in Africa.
Inshallah. So let us hope we'll make that, Allan. Thank you very much, and fantastic explanation, fantastic lecture. And it's really, I want to go back to your session once again and see it. There are so much numbers you have crunched into it. So it's very, very important for everybody to understand and learn. Okay, so I take this as an opportunity. Any final thoughts, Dr. Allan, for supply chain aspirants for 2025? So top three takeaways. What is it you would like to advise?
So I would advise for medical industry, supply chain is a big business. The skill and manpower you seek is in Nigeria, is in Africa as a whole. You have the skill, you have the manpower, and then you have the people committed and ready to work with any business around. Number two is that you have fiscal policies that are encouraging businesses to come. So the policies of government is to attract more foreign direct investments. So be happy, be ready, and be willing to come to Africa to invest. And then finally, I'll tell you that there is serious infrastructural development across Africa, especially in Nigeria, Ghana, and South Africa, especially Nigeria as a case study. There are so much infrastructure and connectivity. So you can come around, and of course, supply chains thrive with infrastructure. And then I tell you that Nigeria has the population, Africa has a population for you to do business. Whatever business you bring to Africa, you'll get your profit. Perfect.
Great. So with that, I take an opportunity to thank Dr. Allan, who has joined from Nigeria. So thank you very much for a very insightful lecture, and look forward for more from you, Dr. Allan. You keep talking in our lectures, in our events, and then we hear more. Okay, so thank you very much. And any questions raised by the participants, I'll post it to you to answer offline. Okay, so with that.